Good morning and welcome to Documentary Business's latest case study. Today, we're going to be speaking with big media. Our guests today are John Lowe out of New York and Ronan Hand out of London. My name is Dan Salerno. I'm sitting in on behalf of Peter Hamilton, the editor and publisher of Documentary Business, and I'm really happy to be here. John and Ronan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
So
Great.
before we get started, why don't we talk a little bit about big media itself? John, you are one of the co-founders of big media. Why don't you tell us a little bit about big media, when it started, and some of the goals and aims that you guys have had over the last decade or more?
Sure. So Big Media was founded in 2009 by three uh, three people from the television business, including me, who had experience, two of us on the distribution side and one on the production side. And we created Big Media to be a full service documentary studio so that we would be able to originate, produce, finance, and sell documentary series. And our goal was to create a model that was sustainable through the ups and downs of the media business and allow us to make profitable multi-episode documentary series that would work for any level of broadcaster anywhere in the world. And 15 years later, I'm really happy with the results of the hard work of the entire team. And we now have people spread out on every continent. We have our shows are airing in every country in the world, and our output in 2024 and 25 will be the highest it's ever been. So, really excited about the future. Some uncertain times, but I think companies like ours and other resourceful companies will be able to persevere.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. If you launched in 2009, even before we probably even really knew about streaming. Fast channels was an acronym we had not yet learned. AVODs and all the other something VODs. You were very much ahead of the game, it sounds like, in that sense, because that type of market really is benefiting from the type of content that big media is putting out there.
Our bet was that the um, revenue per hour for all content would go down over time.
Mm.
We saw, the effects of user-generated content and the battle for eyeballs. So in the end, everyone in every aspect of the media business, whether you're in music, news, docs, feature films, you're competing for eyeballs. And the only way you're going to make money from eyeballs is either subscribers or advertising revenue. So for a company to build a production business and then create something that might cost $1 million to create, it's very difficult for them to compete against a 5-year-old blowing bubbles with their gum and accidentally swallowing it. So the cost of that video is about 2 cents versus $1 million, but it might actually get more eyeballs. So our bet was that revenue would go down. So we better go back to proven model of global co-pros where companies would chip in, uh, pool their resources to create compelling content, and then acquire the rights to that content, only the rights that they needed. So a French broadcaster only really needs French broadcast rights. A German broadcaster, American broadcaster, wherever you're broadcasting, those are the rights you need. Whatever platform whatever rights you're using, those are the only ones you should be buying. If you have two drivers in your family, there's probably not a lot of reasons to have 7 cars. You would only you'd acquire the vehicles you need to achieve your mission. So in the case of a French broadcaster reaching a French audience, those are the rights you should be seeking. And I wish that we could say we were visionary, but the reality is this: one, this was an old model, and two, we didn't have the relationships with the big buyers who were shelling out all this cash. So probably, or maybe, if the biggest players in the world said, "Hey, big media, here's $1 million an episode, make this for us," we might have done it. But fortunately, they were saying, "We don't know who you are. We're not interested in working with you."
Well, I can in my own career, I can attest on being both sides of that conversation. Trust me. Uh, I think it's great. You've done, I think, something that uh, I talk about a lot with producers, both offline and online, about the market is a difficult market right now. There is no doubt. Peter and I have done numerous conversations, both on our webinars and in other forums, about how difficult it is. I don't think that's a big secret. The challenge, I think, for content makers and content providers is, are we going to wait for that to turn around, or are we going to kind of accept that actually this is sort of our new normal, and how do I adapt to that and provide content in a way that meets those needs? And I feel very much that big media has been at the forefront of adapting to that new market even before it got into place. And with that, let me turn to Ronan quick. Ronan, you joined big media a little bit later in its life, and you operate as a creative director. But as you were saying to me a little earlier, you have a little bit of a hand in both the creative, but also an eye on the horizon as to where sort of the bright skies are shining and maybe where the storm clouds are coming. And it gives you a little bit of a direction for the work that you do in putting the ideas out there into the universe.
Yeah, I think, my background has been both as a network exec, as a buyer. So I understand the needs of channels, the needs of schedules, what channels need to tick over to get ratings, and the pressures and that they're under, and the increasing pressures they've been put under over the last 20 years. It's not got easier to run channels. It's got harder to run channels. It's got harder to deliver ratings. So it's not an easy gig being a network exec, much the producers might think it is. It's not easy, it's difficult. And I understand that pressure. And then obviously being in distribution for 5+ years at ITV Studios, I understand the global market and the commercial market of monetizing IP. And I think having that background means that when working with networks, I kind of understand their needs and desires, fears, ambitions, etc. And I think that the show we're here talking about actually is in point, but a lot of our development is what we call network-led development. It's not a new term, where we don't sit there spending huge amounts of money with large development teams developing shows that we love and like. We just listen to broadcasters. We listen to our partners. We find out what they want, and we develop for their slots. We do slot-oriented, budget-oriented development. And so we have a very, very high hit rate. When I was, I've seen a lot of development slates in the jobs that I've done in the past. And, people were lucky to get away with 6-to-1 ratios of development to commission, sometimes 8-to-1. We're at like 2-in-3. We develop 3 shows, 2 of them get made. So we have a very low burn rate in terms of burnt development and dead development, which is great for your setup costs. And our network partners are a development partner in the show we're making for them. They're at the table. We have, I'm in Prague now. I've just left Paris, where I've been speaking to two of our partners actually on this show, so RMC and Interval from Germany, discussing the next iteration of this show. So there'll be a 3rd series, and we've just been walking through that together in Paris. So
I think that's spot on. I think I'll sort of dig into the series in a second here, but takeaway for me, and as somebody who's been on the network side most of his career, listening to the network as opposed to telling the network what they want is a really important skill set. I can tell you, the network people appreciate that very much, and it usually ends up being some of the best productions that come out. But why don't we turn to the show actually that brought us here today, Destruction Decoded. Destruction Decoded is heading into its 3rd season. Season 1 here in the US, for me, I can find on several different fast channels and platforms, as well as Curiosity Stream. But talk about the really sort of, you started this project with 2 primary partners, one out of France, one out of Germany. Talk a little bit, maybe John or Ronan, about how it started. Who did you first approach? And what did you need from them to kind of get rolling? Did you need both of them on board? Just one of them? How did the project really start to get generated between an idea in your head and then something on the screen?
Do you want me to
Ronan,
say
do you
that,
want
John?
me to you want me to address kind of the business side of it, and you can
Yeah,
go into
yeah. If you
creative
could.
side? So
Yeah.
okay, as Ronan talked about, it's really the co-pro for a co-pro model to work. It really has to be an organic process, and people have to be in the same room talking about ideas and formats and saying, asking the question, would this work for you too? And you might talk about 3 or 4 projects where you might find only the fourth one will actually work for everyone. So for us, our model is if we have 1 or 2 or even 3 co-pro partners who are willing to contribute enough money where they're covering at least 50% of the overall budget, our company will deficit finance the rest of the budget. So for that to happen, the co-pro partners have to believe this will be a rating success for them. They have to believe that the amount of money they're putting in is reasonable and they're going to get a good return. And we have to believe that this is going to be something that works in markets other than those original co-pro partners. It's a very simple model, and you have to have discipline to just say no, even if you think your show is great. If no one else is willing to put money up, it might be great, but it might be great for a home movie. So you might just want to shoot something and show, cheap and show it to your family. But something has to be viable for the market. So once we have those elements in place, the general concept and an outline of what the show is, then it goes really deep back into the development team and the production team to fill out all the episodes and make sure the original co-pro partners all love the direction it's going and that we believe it will sell internationally and it's off to the races. And that's called gambling, right? So, but we won't gamble 100% of the money, but we'll gamble 50% of the money. And so, what's another great benefit to having co-pro partners involved? It validates that the show has potential for broadcast. So, if you have a show idea and there's no broadcasters attached, it's just an idea. If you have a show idea and several broadcasters have bought into it, you have a show. It's being made, and other broadcasters say, "Oh, I trust the judgment of those commissioning editors. I'm going to jump in on that too."
And with destruction here, once you've got it's interesting. So once you have your French partner RMC on it, you've also got your German partner involved as well. You're very much then free and clear to explore opportunities in the rest of the world, but you don't need creative partners. You just need business partners, and that might be with, say, a straight sale to a linear or to a digital platform.
Yeah, and that's what really, I think the great thing about big media is there is, as John said, there's a healthy regard for risk, and because there's an ownership of content, there is distribution revenue, and there's an understanding of the value of content over and above the license fees you get for making the show. It's a company where the producers within the company are all cognizant of the commercial value of IP, not only in the territories in which we produce it, but also in the worldwide market. And I think with Destruction Decoded, we made this show with RMC Productions, so RMCP, so the production of RMC in France, and Thibaut Martin is our partner on the show, and he brings a very keen editorial judgment and a very strong directorial sense to the show. It goes out broadcast on his network, on the RMC network in France. We have Enterfall in Germany, and a gentleman called Christian Henskens is our partner there. He has a very keen sense of his network. He knows what works for his network. And I and other people in big media know what works globally, because my background is being a buyer and in distribution. I have a keen sense of what will work outside of any territories in which we get the commercial green light effectively. And a bit of background on how this show came about. It was actually network led. So RMC came to us and said, look, we think this type of show, like the classic countdown format, People
Mhm.
love countdowns, and Americans are as much of a fan as we are, but we are obsessed with countdown formats. We love top tens, we love top hundreds. It's like, you know, a very cultural obsession for British people. And they kind of hadn't been made for a while. And halfway through making the show, we realized why they weren't made, because it's not an easy show to produce. It's a very challenging show to produce, even though it isn't, you know, massive, multiple hundreds of thousands of budget. It requires a very strict and keen editorial discipline to make it. It's a format, effectively. You know, it has a very distinct visual style. You know, there's 10 tops per episode, and they all last for a given period of time. They need to be propulsive, you know, grab your attention quickly, have very defined sound, very defined visuals. And that's the RMC style. The RMC style works really well internationally. It's a classic cable sensibility. Even as a French broadcast, they have a very classic international sensibility. So we knew that would work for the global market. And we then started to develop that show with Entafal, and you know, we had to, and that goes down to locking the subjects of each episode, the individual tops, the 10 tops we're going to cover, getting their approval, getting the network's approval, making sure that we know they'll work for international sales. So at every stage, it's a conversation.
Yeah, it's a really good. Well, and thank you for mentioning the top 10 formats. I did want to sort of frame that. That's an important one. It's an easy sell. You don't really need a whole lot in sort of like 2 lines to submit. You've been rather successful beyond France and Germany as your partners with it. As I mentioned, I can find it on several different services here in the US on multiple platforms. So, but you've also had success selling it around the world. And a second season and even a third one is in production now. So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's as much us as the network's commitment to the project, their commitment to scheduling in the right slots. It works, you know, being a former network exec, you know, it's a scheduler's dream, basically. You schedule it anytime, access peak, post peak, shoulder peak, wherever you want it, it performs. It performs in every slot. It was just stacked on RMC a couple of weeks ago. They did a 6.8% share, which is like, you know, triple their average share. So it's and everyone, as you said, it's an easy elevator pitch, and it's the one-stop shop. So you have, you know, top 10 hurricanes, top 10 volcanoes. You know, it's the one-stop shop. You're going to get everything you need to know from this show. It's got a kind of a tabloid headline, but with a broadsheet, you know, using an English kind of publishing kind of terminology, broadsheet sensibility. So it's easy access, but you get a lot of takeaway, a lot of facts, and you feel like you've learned something after it and been entertained.
And it certainly is something. It's the kind of content that you know, that multiple platforms and multiple networks have an appetite for. It's a staple of any programmer's sort of toolkit that they need. We're sort of a little short on time, so if I could just highlight a couple of the key takeaways for me here is, you know, for producers out there looking to sort of take a lesson from the models and so forth that you guys created, what really I take away is that this isn't necessarily for everybody, because you've got to have a big enough organization and a big enough infrastructure and the relationships themselves, you know, to sort of build on themselves so that you don't get, I think, John, you'd mentioned you have as many as 14 projects in production right now, which is a producer's dream. I'm sure a lot of producers out there would love to have a slate like that.
It's certainly our dream come true. And you know, to be able to continue to grow the team, give people job security in a, you know, volatile market, and to be doing it with a team that gets along really well. I can't think of a better situation to be in. And if I could tell my younger self and anyone else who's getting started in the business, I would say being in a situation like we're in now with our team, with the people we have, in with solid footing and a sound business model, that's actually should be everyone's goal. I think people looking for quick hits, let's build a company and sell it a year later, or let's do this, let's try. No, it's hard work, choosing the right partners, and that includes choosing the right broadcast partners. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
to me, it's a dream come true, and I hope that my work colleagues all feel the same.
Well, you guys have done a great job. Just to remind everybody, the program we were talking about today is Destruction Decoded, now going into its third season. If you're here in the US, it's available on Curiosity, as well as some of the fast channels out there. I believe you've got subsequent seasons that sounds like they're coming up on National Geographic, I believe I read.
Yep, season 2 will premiere soon on Nat Geo in the US and in most of the world.
Well, congratulations on that. That's really an
Thank you.
accomplishment. I'm
It's a
sorry
testament. It's a testament to our brilliant creative and production teams. They did all the hard work to make this successful.
well, I wish we had more time to pursue some of these. I think these are some really interesting conversations, and I think earlier I had said, John, that big media, very much in a world where the headlines are difficult, and we're hearing a lot about cutbacks and contraction and layoffs and stuff. There are some good stories out there to tell, and yours is one of them. So I'm happy that we could bring it to Documentary Business's audience and talk about something that is going really well in this crazy world of television that we all seem to know and love and can't get enough of. So thank you again, John and Ronan, for joining us. I want to thank Kate and Cooper for producing our session. And as always, thank you to Peter Hamilton, the editor and publisher of Documentary Business. I'm Dan Salerno, and thank you for joining. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.